Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this video is going to be about session and like session cookies and all that stuff. And the basic concept is this. Basically, there's been two main ways to handle authorization. So there's authentication and authorization. So authentication is just the whole idea that, hey, there's a user, their password's hashed, and when we log in, we're able to double check their password using a library like bcrypt. That's authentication. We authenticate that you are who you are. Now that we know who you are, the question is, do you have the authorization to continue exploring the website? And this is generally handled in one of two ways. The sort of older traditional way was sessions, which is what I'm going to go over in this video. So what sessions are is when your particular browser, so your browser kind of has like a unique ID for the session that it's in, which means like the browser open currently, and then when you reopen your browser, a new session is created and has like a new ID number and all this stuff. So what happens is when your browser first makes a request to the server sends back a cookie, and that cookie basically lets your server know that what the session number is. Like, this is this session. And then what happens is that the server will save information that's related to that session identity, and that data will exist. It could be saved in the computer's memory, okay, for like, if you're not using it in a big way. Heroku has recently sort of like said like they're not supporting storing stuff really in memory for sessions. So like you do need some sort of store, meaning somewhere to store the session data. So we're going to be using Mongo, and I have a template where Mongo is already configured to be the session store. It just means that, hey, the browser will, so your server will know that this browser, hey, this is the same browser that just made a request before, and we're going to be able to store data in a basically an object for that session. So whenever that particular browser session communicates with our browser, we'll have access to that session object. And the reason we use this is like if they log in, we can store the fact that they've logged in, their user information in that session object, and that way they stay logged in. Just to kind of, the key put it at its simplest is sessions allow us to save data between multiple requests, because otherwise every time a new request goes to your server just starts from scratch. It's like, everything is kind of reset. Sessions allow you to have some sort of way of having sort of like persistent data between requests. So let's generate a template. So I have this template here, and for those of you who like to use my Merced spin-up tool, okay, I will add these recent templates to that tool, so that way those can be generated from that as well. One tool to generate them all. But yeah, so let's do that. Let's generate this project. So again, let me just copy this, and I will use degit for now. Okay, degit powers Merced spin-up. It's just, instead of just have one tool with simpler names, npx degit, and then again it's always the, oh no, that didn't work the way I wanted it to work. Okay, fine. Npx degit, then we put my GitHub, you put whatever GitHub username for whatever repo you're trying to clone, alexmercedcoder slash alexmercedcoder slash, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, ejs-express-supreme, I think it was. Kind of like a Taco Bell burrito supreme. It's a ejs-express template with just a little bit more. And then I'm going to use the main branch because generally I default to a main branch nowadays. And we're going to call this just sessions practice, just to show you what sessions does. Okay, so that's cloned. I'm going to cd into that folder, sessions practice. Do an npm install to install all the libraries. Cool. And if I open this up, my package.json, see, I have this library, express session. That's for creating a session token. And then I have connect MongoDB session. That's going to allow us to connect our Mongo database to be used as a session store. Okay, so that's the rule of that. Okay, now I do need to create a .env. So I'm going to create a, do I have a template.env? Yes, I do. So I'm going to rename this to .env. I'll leave this. Again, I do have a local Mongo server running, so this will work. I'll keep the secret. The secret, the secret can be used in multiple places. Like a secret generally is a secret word. It could be word. It could be like cheese. It could be whatever. But the point of the secret is that generally when you're doing like security stuff, you hash or you encrypt things, and the way you encrypt things uses some sort of secret key, some sort of word that is used to kind of discover how to encrypt the thing. Think of it as like the directions. Okay, you don't need to know the exact math behind it, but basically it'll take that word, in this case secret, secret's my secret, it'll take that word and jumble up the string based on how the structure of that word. So in order for me to de-jumble it up, I would need to use the same tool with the same secret. So unless you know what my secret is, it'd be impossible to unjumble my string. So that's sort of like the security piece. We use this for JWT tokens. We use this for sessions. Okay. And again, sessions is already set up. So you see here, I've already imported my session middleware. Okay, for importing sessions. And then here I configure the session. So this may look, so basically a session, again, it's a piece of middleware. So basically what happens is that it goes through all your normal Express middleware. And then when it hits the session middleware, it basically says like, hey, we communicated with this particular browser session before. Okay. Okay, and then these just basically, I'm passing it the secrets because it's going to encrypt those sessions. Save uninitialized just means, hey, should you create an object if we didn't try to store anything? If not, then don't bother like bothering to save the information in Mongo. Okay, don't bother resaving the session or updating the session if no changes were made. So that's what these things are saying. And then the store is, where should the session data be stored? So I'm using this MongoDB connect MongoDB session middleware in order to connect using our existing database. Okay, so it'll just connect to that database and make a separate connection specifically for storing session data. Okay, so that's what that does. Okay, it's just saying, hey, browsers connect and whatnot. So let's just see this at work. Okay, I'm going to make a route. We'll just call it app dot. Wait, let me think about this. That should be, yeah, I'll put it right there. App.get, and we'll say app.get/count. Okay, and basically what happens is that when you connect, it creates a session, like it recognizes the session, puts the cookie on your computer, and then it creates an object in the request called rec.session. And this object actually will stay the same between multiple browser requests. So let's try this. We're going to say rec.session, and then we can add properties to that object. So rec.session.count. If rec.session.count, actually we'll just do this. Rec.session.count equals rec.session.count. Question mark. So if rec.session account already exists, then I just want to say, hey, it equals rec.session.count plus 1. So it's just one more. If it doesn't exist yet, because we never made the property yet, so it would come back as false, it would be undefined, which is false, then we'll just initialize it at 0. So that's what that's going to do. So if it exists, it's going to increment it. If not, it'll initialize it at 0. And then we're just going to res.send, so just send the text version of the count, rec.session.count. That's it. So if I did this right, what's going to happen is that every time I visit this page, we're going to see that number go up by 1. Because rec.session, again, unlike every other request property, doesn't get reset every time. It'll recognize my browser session, go to Mongo, look up the data that belongs, that's linked to that cookie, and make it available to the request. okay, and put it inside the request session, so that way the data is available between requests. So this is a great place to store things like, hey, is the user logged in, or does the user have certain like authority levels, like are they an admin? This kind of data that you need like on multiple requests. Okay, cool. So with that, let me run the server. npm run dev. Okay, the server is running and it's connected to Mongo. Wonderful. And I'll go to localhost 3000 /count. To the right port. Oh, we got an error. Let's see what the error says. Valid status code 0. Oh, it thinks it's a status code. Okay, so here's what I will do. I want to turn this into a string so that way it doesn't think it's a status code. So it thinks I'm trying to pass a status code of 0. So what I'm going to do is rec.session.count, and we'll just say the count is, and then use string interpolation, so I'm injecting the number into a string. There we go. So we'll say the count is this. And this restarted. The count is 0. Good. Now if I refresh. Oh, nope, that didn't quite work. Oh, because 0 is false. So even though it's initialized at 0, it's going to be treated as false every time. So there's actually a solution for that. Actually, that wouldn't necessarily be practical here. I guess let's initialize it at 1. So that way if it's false or 0, it'll just start at 1. So if I refresh, it's 1. Then I refresh, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you see, like, the number is not resetting itself. So even though I'm sending a new request, the information in the session object is what it was the last time this particular browser session. But now, if I open an incognito browser, so I'm opening up a new, and technically this browser is a new browser session. It's going to have like a new ID number for like this particular browser. So if I go back to that same page, localhost 3000 /count, the count should start over again. And see, the count is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But see, now if I go over here, this count still counts where this one left off. Because the way it knows is basically by the individual browser session. So if I open up the DevTools and I go to application, I should be able to find like a cookie somewhere. So where do they store it? And the session storage works the same way. It's based on the browser session. That's a different discussion for a different day. But let's see here, cookies. Okay, so here's we have it's a session cookie. Okay. And see, this cookie just has the identifier. And see, this big jumble of letters here is jumbled based on our secret. Okay, so that's how it is able to read that. Like, we can't read it, but it knows how to decode it based on the secret. So long as the secret doesn't change, and other servers that have different secrets won't be able to read that one, and we won't be able to read theirs. But that's how it knows, like this session. And then if I go here, I should find a cookie as well. So I go to application, let's go see there are cookies, see, and it has its own cookie. And see, it's not the same. Not the same. So in that case, let me just make sure, like, how different are they? Yeah, they're pretty different. And that's how it knows which session, which object it's grabbing from Mongo. Okay. Now again, if you don't use a store, it's going to use memory. But what's going to happen is that you'll have like issues deploying to Heroku if you're using Heroku. So you will need to connect it to sort of a store of some sort for sessions to work. Your website will work. It just, like, if you use a memory store, what's going to happen is that their sessions won't stick around. Like, their sessions will just kind of disappear into the ether because of the way that Heroku works. It's what's called ephemeral. Ephemeral means like it exists in the moment. It's kind of like kind of exists, kind of doesn't, kind of ghost. Like it's an abstraction. But that's what sessions is. That's all sessions is. There's a cookie put on the computer. That cookie allows your server to know which session is communicating with the server, and then it stores an object for that particular session, so that way you can save data for that session. Again, what kind of data would you want to save here? Tracking whether the user has logged in. okay, other kind of user authorization levels, any kind of data you want. In this case, just a count: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So once they would log in, I would use rec.session to basically to say, hey, to check if they're logged in. Now, what some people may do, okay, so I could actually just literally just make a, let's make another route, app.get, and call this /login. Just going to kind of mock a login route real quick. Login rec res. Okay, rec, and then we'll just say, hey, rec.session logged in equals true. Okay, and then we'll just say res.json, and we'll just send back the session object so you can see how the session object's evolving. Okay. And also, just so you know, every time the server restarts, that also resets the sessions. So technically, all those sessions that I had going a second ago, they should have just restarted. Okay, it's basically every server restart, and anytime the browser closes, or like an incognito browser or a different browser has been open, that's going to be a new session. Okay, rec.session. So that one's going to be for logging in. If I go to that route, it'll automatically mark me as logged in. And then I'll make another route that checks to see if I'm logged in. Are you? We'll call this /are you? Rec res. I'm missing a quotation mark over here. And basically what's going to happen here is going to say if rec.session .logged in. Okay, and basically if it equals true. And like one of the great things I love about JavaScript is I don't have to write if rec.session.logged in equals true, because it'll just evaluate the truthiness or falsiness of the variable. So I can just put the variable and say, hey, if this variable is truthy, it's true. So if the variable's true, it's truthy. So that works. So if rec.session.logged in, so if that equals true, then res.send, you are logged in. Else, res.send rec.session. So that way we can see that we're not logged in. Okay, and it's still complaining. Let's see what it's complaining about. Oop, yep, there's a missing S here. There we go. And the server's working. So let's try that out. First, let's just see if we are logged in already. So if I go /ru, okay, see, it sends me back the session object. And see, the session object actually has this cookie in it. Okay, we don't need to play with that. And there's my count. Okay, well, it still kept my count. Okay, nice. I think it's because I have the Mongo store. Now, basically, if I was using a memory store, meaning like the application wasn't saving it to a database, then every time the server restart, it would restart the count because the memory of the application has been reset. But in this case, since I'm using Mongo as a store, it is actually saving the data between restarts of the server. Well, you see the logged in property is not there. So now I'm going to go to login /login, and now let's take a look and see. Now it says logged in equals true. So now if I go back to you are logged in. Okay, so see, that's essentially like how you would use sessions to kind of handle authorization. You would have something stored in session to kind of signal that you're logged in. One thing people might do is they might create a piece of middleware. So we might create a custom piece of middleware. So I'll just go over here and put this after session. So app.use. So we're going to create our own custom middleware that just gets used every time. So I just pass a function, rec res next. And what this middleware will do, it's going to check if rec.session.logged in is true. And if it is true, it's going to create a property called rec.user, and we'll say we store like the username in there, username Alex, and any other kind of user information I want to store in there. Okay, so instead of using that logged in property as the way we determine things, we'll check to see if the user property is. So then what they'll do here is that instead of checking to see if logged in is set, they'll just see if rec.user exists. And if rec.user exists, then you're good. Now logged in has already been turned on. Okay. But what I will do is we will send an object. I'm going to change this response. Well, it doesn't really matter because. But now see it's determined based on whether rec.user exists. So if I refresh, I'm still logged in because what happens is that my session has the logged in property as true. So when it hits this middleware, and actually, you know what? I need to put the word. I need to make sure I do next. I won't get an error. Okay. You always have to make sure you run next after everything is done in your middleware. So next, so that way it goes to the next piece of middleware. I'm surprised I didn't get an error. But if I try that again, there we go. Okay. So essentially what's happening is that rec.user does exist because by the time it gets to this middleware, the rec.session logged in is true. It adds the rec.user property, makes it equal this object, and then it hits next, which sends it back into the routers, goes to this router, doesn't find the match, goes to this one, doesn't find the match, goes to this one, doesn't find the match, then goes to this one, it's like, oh, you're a match, and then it's like, oh, wait, if rec.user does exist because we created it up here. But again, if I hadn't logged in, so like, let's see here. If I go back to my incognito browser and I go to RU, so here I'm still not logged in. Okay, so I'm getting the cookie, I'm getting the whole session object passed to me. But if I go to log in, okay, /login, now login equals true. Okay, cool. And then if I go to RU again, I get you are logged in. Okay, so the cookie was set. So that's it. That's all session is. It's a place to store data between requests. It's the only place that data will exist between requests. So even that rec.user gets reset every time. But every time, my middleware is going to check to see if the thing that I want is in session. This is why me personally, I won't bother with this piece of middleware here. I'll just use rec.session and just store the user in session. And just, use everything from session because it's already there. But, this is a little bit more semantic to know that there's, hey, property stored with user. It's a little bit more similar to how like Ruby on Rails does things. But yeah, that's what sessions is. Now this works great when everything is being done by one server. Nowadays, most applications are many servers doing many little things, a lot of microservices. So this is why a lot of people have moved over to JWT when they're using like React on the front end or Angular on the front end, because a lot less happens on the server and more happens off the server. So you need ways to be able to kind of prove that you're logged in across multiple servers, and JWT tokens tends to handle that a little bit better because the identifier is, think of the JWT token as like having like a badge like at a conference, and you can go to the different places, and as long as you show your badge, they know you're in. Sessions is more like having a list at the door. So I have to make sure that I'm on the list at every door to make sure that they will let me in. And just because one club has me on their list doesn't mean every other club has me on their list. So it just depends on sort of like the purpose of your application, which one you might want to use. But hopefully this makes sessions and session cookies a little bit clearer as to what they do and what their role is versus like JWT tokens. I've already done plenty of videos on JWT tokens, so I would refer you to those. But again, this template is available if you want to clone it. I'll put the command in the video description. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com.